It's another lunchtime at the Kenny on Saturday as Millwall are the visitors to Kenilworth Road for a massive game of Sky Bet Championship football. Alongside me to preview it, I've got the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe as always. Jimbo, it's probably not a must-win game. We're in the territory of it'd be bloody nice to win.
Or is it a must-win game?
Well, we'll discuss that and plenty more right after this intro.
I believe our supporters are the best supporters in the country.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category at the Football Content Awards. This season, the show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned before the intro, we are looking ahead to Luton Town versus Millwall Saturday, 12:30pm kickoff. This one's always booked in for Sky Sports, isn't it? I think the last time they didn't show Luton v Millwall was about 1926, and this one is no different. Jimbo, ready for a lunchtime at the Kenny, mate?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I do note that they always put it on Sky, don't they? It's the 40th anniversary of the reason why it's on Sky, and I don't see that happening these days. Well, fingers crossed it doesn't anyway. I don't want to be in a stadium for that. But what I do want to be in a stadium for is Matt Bloomfield's first win.
And let's hope it does come on Saturday, because if it does, with enough real Millwall much closer to us, they're one of those sides that probably looking like we were just going into Christmas, where there's enough teams between us and the bottom three, even though there aren't as many points, that they'll be comfortable. But if we can reel them in a little bit, my word, it would help.
Well, just anyone at the moment. There's a lot of teams around that bottom half and the relegation zone that are picking up the points that we hoped we would be picking up. I know it's only 3 games into the Bloomfield era, and if they can focus on the one and only reason why they lost that game at Oxford, and carry on the positive increasingly positive parts of the 2 games that we have seen, of course there's hope. Didn't feel like that on Tuesday night, and it hasn't felt like that on the road at all, but at home it has, and hopefully those things can click, and with a couple of changes, a couple of little tweaks, then hopefully we can get something.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, wasn't it? On Tuesday night for an hour there was hope. There was more than hope. There was good stuff in front of us, but football is 90 minutes. It's not like NFL, my other enjoyable sport, which is only 60 minutes, would be laughing. Absolutely laughing if we played NFL rules, 60 minutes, because
we'd be in the bloody stadium for 4 hours though. My toes wouldn't survive.
Do you know what? We'd be top of the bloody league, so I'd happily take it, because it's the last half an hour where it all goes pear-shaped, isn't it? Millwall, I mean, they must be that bad. They are the only team we've beaten on the road this season. In terms of playing the second game against a team at home, this is the only team right now, as we sit here towards the end of January, that Luton can do the double against, Jimbo.
Heady days.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're right. And who would have thought back then that would be the only bloody away win of 2024, and we're still waiting, and we're in the last knockings of January, really. 2025. Listen, you can only really focus on the next thing, can't you? And that's the old football adage that people get a bit bored by. But as much as that happened at the Kassem the other day, you can't know anything about it now. You've got to, as those interviews after the Oxford game suggested, you've got to now learn from mistakes. The problem is they've been saying that for a long time, but in their favour, they haven't really been happening at home. Fingers crossed they don't.
Yeah, and that needs to stay the case, doesn't it? That's for sure, because if it starts creeping in at home, Alarm bells, well, if they're not already ringing, they'll be at top noise, won't they?
But you said it might not be a must-win, but you're still looking at the results the other teams are getting in the bottom half and the relegation zone, and where we seem to be constantly, perpetually in an away sense, and then if you don't start winning these home games, we know where that leads. So that's why I thought, it probably is a must-win at this stage.
Well, another reason why it's must-win, Jimbo, or could be must-win, it's Cardiff Derby on Saturday. The two sides immediately above the relegation zone playing each other at 3 o'clock. So one of them's going to get points, if not both of them. So one of them's going to, were we not to win, Cardiff could go 5 points clear of us, Derby 4 points clear of us, and all of a sudden we start running out of sides we can catch even if we do start winning.
Yeah, and that's the concern, isn't it? It's kind of, it is still in hand if you can get the results, but if you don't and you're looking over your shoulder at what's going on, well, everything else is going the wrong way for Luton. Those are things you can't affect, but the thing you can affect is get it right on the pitch, and that if that means what we saw in an attacking sense, but shutting up shop enough that we can keep them out. And yeah, we beat them 1-0 at their place. I'd happily take that. I think everybody would, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. No Ted and Mengi to score it this time, though, unfortunately. 1 win in 13 Millwall come here in the league. So the form's not any better than Luton's. In fact, it's probably not as good as Luton's. Luton won twice in the last 13. At least twice. It might even be more than that. I can't even remember how far 13 games go back now, and I don't really want to look because the rest of the results aren't particularly encouraging. But of course, we beat Derby and we beat Stoke in the last 13 games. But yeah, 1 win in 13. That's obviously brought about a change in manager, as it always does in this division. Neil Harris is a thing of the past. Alex Neil is now in place. I don't think he's going to change too much in such a short space of time. I still expect Millwall to be exactly the same Millwall. Get the ball out wide, throw plenty of balls into our box. They're the third best in this league, according to FootMob, for accurate crosses this season. Ironically, we're second. Coventry are first. Frank Lampard's Coventry City, are first. Every single long throw opportunity they get, I'm sure it's still going to get launched into our box. And this is where I have my concern over Saturday, Jimbo. I don't think, or I wouldn't normally think that Luton can't beat Millwall at home, but I'm not convinced Luton can keep Millwall's aerial threat at bay. Certainly based on what I saw on Tuesday night. It's giving me nightmares, to be quite honest with you.
Well, this is it, isn't it? The pressure on everything ramps up every time that the away form is not up to scratch. I mean, apart from that, at Millwall, every other time it hasn't been up to scratch. The pressure at home, and that's why fans got so angry after the Norwich game at home, because the home form was essentially keeping the wolf from the proverbial door, and then until it didn't. And now we're in this situation. But yeah, that is a major concern, that if that goes wrong, then there is no paddle left, and we are definitely on that up that creek.
Yeah, we've caught the rapids part of the creek, haven't we? Sold their best player, though. Probably not their best player, that's wrong. Japhet Tanganga would be their best player, wouldn't he? He was, Jesus Christ, if we can kidnap him on Saturday, stick him in the home dressing room and make sure he can only play for Luton Town for the rest of the season, we would be hunky-dory from what I saw of him at their place, because he was brilliant.
Yeah, really good. That
Probably
guy.
the best centre-half we've come up against this season, I think, in terms of how he played against us. You could tell he's come through at Tottenham. He was a Rolls Royce with the ball at his feet. Never say die attitude. The goal wasn't on him, was it? It was 25 yards specky from Ted and Mengi. But in terms of every time the ball came in the box, you didn't even need to look who the name and number was, because you knew it was him, because he got rid of everything.
Imagine if we had one of those that just read everything.
Just kidnap him.
Cleared the hell out of that ball.
Don't worry about all this signing nonsense. Just kidnap him. Put someone else's shirt on him and stick him out for Luton the next week.
I don't want to be an accessory to this crime here. You're on your own.
Listen, it's getting to that stage where, criminal offences might have to be committed. No, it's not. Of course it's not. But he's good. And he's going to be a problem for our attacker. whoever that may be, and we'll come on to that shortly. But Romain Esse, in terms of their creativity, was their best player, or one of their best players. He's gone to Crystal Palace, who seem to like rhyming Eze, Elise, and any other A that they can get. So that's handy at least. At least we haven't got to come up against a tricky little winger. They'll probably still have someone who could stick the ball in the box, but at least it's not him, because he put a couple of decent balls in down at their place.
Every other team seems to have had somebody that's caused a bit of bother.
Yep, that's true.
Apart from Preston. Who came to do nothing.
And still took 4 points off us this season.
Yes, exactly. If we could have a bit more of their lack of ambition, but a bit more of the goals for Luton, then that would be wonderful.
Yeah, merger of the two Matt Bloomfield performances would be absolutely lovely, wouldn't it? Yeah, time will tell if we get it. Macaulay Langstaff was their striker against Cardiff in midweek. I didn't see much of the game. Obviously, that it was on at the same time that Luton were on. I got in the car just as Cardiff equalised. Right at the end, so I really didn't see much. But obviously, Langstaff went through 1-on-1 at their place, didn't he? And Kaminsky saved him, and thank God we did. Otherwise, the away form would look even more pathetic than it does. Only Plymouth Argyle have scored less goals in the Championship this season than Millwall. So they're not free scoring. That doesn't mean anything when they come up against our defence, has to be said.
Yeah, but neither were Oxford, were they? And then look.
Well, yeah, indeed. At least Oxford were in good form, though, weren't they? This lot aren't in good form. 1 win in 13, and second lowest scorers in the Championship would attribute as to why they've only got 1 win in 13. Lost at home to Hull last weekend as well, so not exactly doing us any favours with the teams that they're losing to. Lost to Hull and drew with Cardiff in the last week. Cheers, lads.
I mean, that makes it even worse going to this one, because if they're losing to them lot, you'd like to think that Luton could get some points, and if they don't, where are they going to come from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We should timestamp this. We're recording this on Wednesday night so that we can get, the review of the Oxford game out to you, and then get this one sorted out and everything out to you on Friday morning, so that we can get this out as early as we possibly can, because obviously we've got the early kickoff. We want to give you as much time to get your score predictions in as you possibly can. So as we sit here right now, no new signings. Let's hope by the time this game kicks off on Saturday that new signings are through the door, and if they are, some of the team stuff that we're about to talk about might be null and void, albeit I suspect a new signing coming in that late would only be on the bench anyway. I don't see a Isaiah Jones situation unless it is that warrior like Cameron Carter-Vickers type defender who would probably get thrown in just purely because of the aerial bombardment we're about to face. But let's assume, for the purpose of this podcast, Jimbo, that status quo is as was. We have to make changes, right? We cannot see that again.
That's the obvious thing. That's the one thing that you can do, as well as drill the hell out of them on the training ground from between Oxford and Millwall to make sure that doesn't happen again. But I think half of it is possibly a mindset mentality thing, which is going to be harder to fix. So then the other option is just changes. I mean, we have got changes now. I mean, he was talking up Mads Andersen before the Oxford game, and he's back available now. So I think that probably... He's been quite ruthless so far, hasn't he? He changed the entire forward line both games. And he doesn't have that connection with the players yet, which is probably a good thing, which means he can just, if he's not done the business, and out you come. And I know, obviously, in previous games and months and stuff, when there hasn't been options, you've just had to go with what you have. But when you've got Mads Andersen on the bench, then probably now is the time to utilise him, isn't there?
Mads for Holmes?
I think that would make sense, really. I mean, that Holmes was in the general vicinity of 2 of the goals, but not close enough. So on that basis, that would be the obvious choice, I think.
Stretching general vicinity, it's particularly if you're talking about the third one. You was talking about the first 2. Yeah, Mads, go in, see if you can stand in front of the ball rather than turn your back on it, and if you can, I will wax lyrical about you on Sunday when we do the review of this game, because I am crying for someone to just stand there and let the ball hit them rather than turn their back on it. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, when he came back after the really long forever layoff that he was on, he came in and he did all the basics well. He didn't look particularly flashy or anything, but we don't need that. We need the basics done well, and he did that. And Bloomfield does know about him because they were in the third tier or playing against each other when he was at Barnsley and Bloomfield was at Wycombe, so he knows all about him. It just seems like the obvious choice there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he's got height. You know, as we said, we're expecting an aerial bombardment, for the want of a better phrase. I tell you, I can't see how that can be the only change, though. Jimbo, not just because of what happened at Oxford, but it's a 3-game week. It's a little bit shorter of a 3-game week with this game kicking off 3 hours earlier than usual, or 2.5 hours earlier. Sorry. Alfie, fancy that we're in a position that he starts?
Straight back in for me. He showed unbelievable sharpness when he came on for a player that's been out for 2.5 months and probably couldn't walk on his ankle for half of that. Great first touch, really sharp, lively, 3 crossing chances, 2 of them very useful. The strikers nowhere near him. But, you know, that before he went out, he was the leading chance creator in the championships, and you have to put him in. Not that they obviously scored goals at Oxford, so that wasn't a problem, and they created enough opportunities against Preston without one clear cut, but enough final third passes, which Bloomfield was pleased about, season best at that point. So you had the leading chance creator at the time that he was injured into the mix, and then that feels like a much healthier mix.
Yeah. Are you playing him left back or left wing where he played at Oxford?
This is going to be the interesting debate, isn't it, to see long term. Obviously, we've asked, and the answer was, I think you can play both. But I would like to see him further forward, quite honest. He can do the defensive duties. Hasn't always been the best at that, but where his strength is obviously going forward with his head up, bit of space in front of him, whip the ball in and do that. Obviously, then the question is who goes behind him, doesn't it? But let's deal with the main talents that he's got there first and utilise them a bit further forward.
If Alfie played wide up on the left side of the front three, as he did at Oxford, he's almost gone full circle on the pitch because he played right wing back at Millwall, didn't he? That night, and he actually played right wing back pretty well that day. That's not to say I want to ever see him there again, but it certainly wasn't the worst performance I've seen at right wing back this season. Let's put it this way. Yeah, I guess Matt's dilemma here. Well, one, how fit is he? Because if he plays left back, you've got to get up and down in that formation. Whereas if you play left wing, you've largely only got to get up and back a little bit. You haven't got to go all the way back, have you?
Yeah, well, that's part of my thinking. Mm-hmm. But also, yeah, if he can't cope with full 90 minutes straight away, I'd rather he played 60 devastated minutes and whip him off.
Me too. But the other thing then, if he comes in and plays wide on the left, you know, he's replacing Zach Nelson, who's been a bright spark of the last month or so. Zach could play one of the 3 midfield roles, but those 3 midfielders have just excelled at Oxford. It's certainly of no fault of theirs that we lost that game of football. So that would either mean that, Zach goes to the bench if we did that, or Alfie could play left back instead of Amari Bell. But again, his workload would be much greater in that situation, and then Zach could play in front of him. So it's an interesting. It's probably not a dilemma, is it? Because it's a good thing to have. It's a good headache to have.
I think either or you'd be happy with, and it would be harsh on Zach for him to be out of the side. But when you're talking about a player of Doughty's quality and calibre at the moment, obviously be ahead of Zach Nelson. I want to see Zach Nelson more. I'd like to think that he could probably be more in the centre of the pitch, a sort of number 10-ish role. Remains to be seen where they can actually find his best space. But yeah, for the situation that we're in, with Doughty coming in and his crossing potential, that's just going to be hopefully a boost to the strikers who just aren't scoring goals at the moment. So I think it's probably wise that if you're going to favour one of the two, it would be Doughty. In an ideal world, you'd find space for both of them, but maybe that's not for this weekend.
So Doughty further forward, right back. I don't think Hashi did anything wrong against Preston. Statistically, FootMob had him as our best player. Lots of that was because of the aerial duels he won. That's important here. There's going to be a lot of aerial duels to be won. However, he didn't have his greatest game on Tuesday night. Actually, that cross came in far too easily for the first one down that side, and he was in the vicinity. As I said in the Oxford review, I couldn't tell if it was him or Holmes who were meant to be picking up the geezer who scored the second goal, but they were both in and around it, and he turned his back on the shot. Is it time to switch that out and put Rue Waters back in at right back?
Well, probably if you're going on the basis that Bloomfield so far has been quite ruthless. Yeah. There is going to be a constant debate with all players about whether it's an away performance or a home performance, isn't it? Because if you take the two, the Hashi was quite good against Preston at home, and then not many of the defenders covered themselves in glory against Oxford. So you could say there's a shout for Hashi, but then if he's going to see anything from Rue Waters or try him out, when you tried out most of the squad so far, then that would make sense too. So I would actually stick with Hashi, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I would too. Yeah, the aerial threat, I'm just scared of it, to be honest. You always are against Millwall, but you particularly are after the shambles that we made of it in midweek. Striker. That did not work on Tuesday night, I think it's fair to say. Eli couldn't have made it any more obvious that his confidence is through the floor, than if he painted it in neon paint on the wall somewhere. It's got to be Morris back for this one, hasn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. And it looks like they're going to play this lone striker with the three just behind. And that would, so far, in the evidence we've seen of the two games, would be Morris. Because Elijah had that decent chance. I think it's probably still a more difficult chance people are making out, but it should really have got shot off and got it on target and tested the goalkeeper. Whereas, and it's not the first time in recent games where he's been put through and hasn't quite done it. But you could say that about Morris as well. There was one where he took an extra touch. I forget the name.
Norwich,
now. Norwich, yeah, and it didn't come off. So. But yeah, just on the basis of the Oxford game, I think you switch it up again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We'd love Elijah to score. Of course we would. We'd love him to go on a confident run. A lot of the issues that we're having at the minute would be solved in an instant if he did. Ditto if Morris does. Like you said in the last podcast, he's 6 without a goal right now, and we need that change in whoever that centre forward is. We need some goals from them. Any other changes?
Not for now, I don't think. I don't think you can afford to not play the midfield trio. They were so good in that 60 minutes at Oxford. Clark has really, really improved from earlier season where he was getting pelters from people. He's one of the best players. But Nakamba seemed to be back to his best in that 60 minutes when there were some people questioning whether his knees had gone, which I think was probably legitimate at the time. But so I'm glad to see that he's back on form. But he's also playing in a position that works for him. So,
as is Clark.
Go figure, Clark as well. And Krause, that was one of his best games. That 60 minutes at Oxford, one of his best games. Even if you take out the goal, which is a wonderful strike, really quite penetrative running, head up with the ball, looking to pass, work some little triangles well with the other players. And I think and even if you don't give him the ball, if you're going to press, he'll snipe around in that and try and win the ball back. He's one of the best in the Luton squad at doing it. So I think don't mess with that trio.
Joint most tackles won per 90 minutes in the Championship this season now. Tom Krause, 2.9 per game. Doesn't sound a lot, but tackles, it's basically it's not a tackle that you go in for, it's a tackle where you come out with the ball, and that's a decent effort.
It's where he makes them as well, because the most eye-catching ones is he wins it in their first third, which is the dangerous part of it.
I would agree. I would agree with your assessment, and he's just scored. Bit harsh to say, cheers mate, but sit on the subs bench for this one, isn't it? When you've just scored. This game's likely to be played in the middle of the park for an awful lot of it. They're not a great watch, Millwall, unless Alex Neil has perform miracles, and I can't believe that he has done. They're a very, very tough watch. They're an even tougher watch than what Preston were, based on the game down at their place at least. Different manager, admittedly. So yeah, I think the middle of the park. We've got to win the middle of the park. If we're going to stay up this season, we have to start winning the middle of the park. And those three at the minute are winning the middle of the park. I mean, Nakamba looks brilliant in this position. Clark's nowhere near the defence, which is happy days, because that's generally where people have criticised him, when he's been in a defensive area of the pitch, because he doesn't have the natural defensive instincts. Why would he? Started life as a right winger through the ranks at Accrington. It's only when Nathan Jones saw the potential in him for a central midfielder did he change. He even arrived here as a right winger. So why would he have all of the defensive instincts? He wouldn't. So yeah, no problem with that midfield three myself. Really do like the way that Krause is coming on, particularly under Matt Bloomfield. Just having three of them in there, just knowing that Marvellous is there, allows Clark and Krause the freedom to go and do their thing, not just in chasing the ball, but when they get it, they've got a little bit of freedom that they can take risks, put the ball at risk, as the phrase that we're going to hear in Orphan. It's going to become the controllables of the Matt Bloomfield era, that phrase, isn't it? But they can do that because if they lose it, they've got one of the best defensive midfielders that this club's had in a long time behind them sweeping up. And Marv's passing has come on leaps and bounds in this formation. I mentioned it after the Preston game. It's not rocket science. If I pass a ball over 5 yards, I'm more likely to make it a successful one than if I'm passing it over 50 yards or anything that you do over 5 yards to 50 yards in life. But if you keep doing simple things well in a game of football, in professional sport, the person or the team that does the simple things the best are the ones that win. And they're not the ones who do the miracle things the best. They're the ones who do the simple things, because there's more simple things that contributes to the sporting contest than there are miracle things. And if we can get back to doing the more simple things, particularly defensively, the more we're going to be in games of football and hopefully in time win them. That's just sensible logic, but it applies.
Yeah, all those things I find they're sort of micro actions that add into the momentum of a game, and you can always tell if it's going for you. You'll get second balls or you might get decisions, but little things go for you. You get a handy little deflection off somebody, you get a corner, or the other way you're in a bit of bother, but you get a goal kick, that sort of thing. They add up, everything. But on the midfield trio, the balance is just so much better. It makes you look back and go, why were they trying to persist with two? We don't need to do it, and we have done it. I'm
trying not to do it.
We have done it before, but it wasn't working. Luton were getting overrun in the midfield. It was plain as day for everybody to see, and lo and behold, what you do when you put the three in there, teams aren't bursting through the middle like they were for the entire first half of the season. And that's why... That's partly why the Oxford one was so bloody frustrating, because if there are any options to get down the side and cross it in, you've referenced it, you'd hope that the defenders would be able to head it away, and they didn't. The midfield trio did their job in every sense, and Clark was outstanding. There was a couple of little confident plays, one sort of over the other side of the 18-yard box, who sort of dragged it past two defenders, glorious run. And then I think somebody got in his way. Brown.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Run. Luton players had stopped running with the ball under Rob. They just had, the wheres and the why-fors and the reasons for it and everything can be done until we're blue in the face. Luton players weren't running with the ball. They weren't.
There's this phrase, putting the ball at risk. I've seen some people say, well, obviously, but sometimes that change of opinion, change of view, change of focus, and that one phrase says, that's what I want you to do, go and do that now, can change the script a bit.
And it's a simple phrase.
Yeah.
There's no complicating that. Everyone knows what he means by that.
But
Don't go backwards when you're in a good position is effectively what he's meaning by it.
And also, I wrote a piece about it, so you can go and look at it on the website, Lutonian.com, but he also referenced what it means and what it doesn't mean. So putting the ball at risk is in that final third, then you've got the freedom. Down some of the flanks, you've got the freedom, because if the ball breaks, you've got players behind. Marv, like especially, that can try and cut that off and win the ball back as quickly as possible. What it doesn't mean is fanning about with it around the back unnecessarily and playing dangerous balls there. So there's a time and a place, and that sounds so obvious, but football is a very simple game, isn't it? Sometimes it's too complicated.
Complicated by idiots, as they say. Yeah, you're right. That's not Lamine fannying about, is it? That's just technical term.
It's technically fanny.
Yep, touche. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I like the setup of that midfield. I really, really do. And you're right. You know, I referenced it after the Oxford game, and I referenced it for the reason we want our team to force teams out wide because we have no pace in centre of defence. So you don't want nippy bastards going at our two central defenders because they can't deal with pace. They're not built for pace. One's 6'3" or whatever he is, and the other one's 6 foot. They're not going to be Speedy Gonzalez, but what you do expect them to do, because they're 6'3" and 6 foot whatever, is head balls away. So the more we can force players out wide, like we did 2 years ago when we were masters at this, you know, then you had Lockyer and Osho heading it away, and now we've got McGuinness and, well, we think Mads Anderson in this one, or at least, well, the two of us would pick Mads Anderson. Who knows what Matt will do with regards to that. That's how we want it to be. And then if we can get our pace, i.e. Alfie and Isaiah, down at their defenders, who equally aren't particularly quick, then we'll have some joy out wide, and hopefully the balls in the box connect with the striker this time, which, as Jimbo said, didn't quite happen in the latter stages at Oxford. So there is ways to win this game. Yes, we're going to have to nullify this aerial bombardment should it arrive. One way is not to give throw-ins away in our half. We've just done this on Tuesday night. We've just had a long throw specialist put the ball as far up towards the halfway line as we possibly can if we have to put it out. Don't put it out on the edge of our box and allow them a free shot to just launch it in on a goalkeeper who we know full well is just going to stick to his goal line and going to have men all around him.
If you think to the Preston game, and I do have to caveat that, and we all have to caveat that Preston came to do absolutely nothing. They were the most unadventurous team I've ever seen. But
and if Millwall want to do that, be
our
ahead, guests.
Go ahead, yeah. But the possession stats for Luton against that game were quite encouraging. Now, obviously, I don't want possessions for possession's sake, and Bloomfield has said that. You want to be trying to do stuff with it, and it's not this passing it around the back scenario, which...
Fannying it around, I believe you just called it.
Yeah, you've thrown me there. But no, no. Yeah, the possession stats would lend themselves to this game more if they can replicate that. Again, Millwall might pose a bit more of a threat than Preston, but if they can keep the ball more, less chance of Millwall having the ball to lump it in. So if they can maintain that sort of levels, it will give us a bit more comfort as well if we've got the ball. And think how many times home and away under Rob where it'd be lumping it up to the striker, it comes straight back, and there's no midfield in the middle to thwart anybody, and it felt very desperate and on the back foot. And at the moment it doesn't, because of the out possession stuff. Looks very neat and tidy, and there's, regardless of what the formation is going forward, and going back towards Luton's goal, two very tight, very well drilled for the most part, apart from that Oxford game, 2 banks of 4. Looks good.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Yeah. And if you see that gun, lads, throw the thing as far away from Kenilworth Road as you possibly can on Saturday, so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot here, because 3 points here is massive. Stoke play at the same time as us. The rest of them all play after us. We've got a chance here to put the pressure on every single team that's around us and reel Millwall in at the same time. So let's hope we do it. That's how we're looking at it. Let us know if you agree with those changes. Would you make any other changes? Who would they be? Let us know. And yeah, it'd be good to consider them all and see where we're at. Where we sit here on Sunday evening to reflect on what we hope will be 3 points for Luton. Just the score predictions to go on this episode of the podcast. It's an odd game, so it's me to go first.
It says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've got faith that he'll do whatever's necessary to make sure that the cock-ups of the other night aren't replicated here as much as he possibly can, whether that's personnel changes or slight tweaks or whatever it is. So I do expect a little bit of a build-up on our attacking play as well, particularly if Alfie starts. So I'm okay with Luton winning this game. 2-0.
Big scores. You're a gambling man, though, aren't you?
I ain't betting on that, though.
No. But I'm glad you said 2-0 then, because that gives me the nice, easy one of just going for a 1-0. 1-0 to Luton.
1-0 Luton for Jimbo, 2-0 Luton for me. Get your score predictions into us. Roughly 24 hours, just over 24 hours to get your score predictions in here. And yeah, we'll give you a shout out if you get it right after the game. We will give a full update of the leaderboard after this Millwall game. There's been no correct scores for the last 2 games, and travelling and games and podcasts and everything else, we've just not had a chance to update everything yet. But I will make sure I get that done by Sunday when we do the Millwall review. So you'll have a full leaderboard. But it's pretty much the same as it was.
As you were, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much the same as it was the last time that we did it. Just before we go, I know he listens to preview podcasts on the day of games, and I'm sure it'll be no different this time. Mark Crowther starts his challenge on Saturday. He was going to start it 2 weeks' time when we played against Plymouth, but that game's been canned, so he's going to start it on Saturday. Even more of a glutton for punishment, Mark, because this is obviously a 12:30 kickoff, and that game was a 3 o'clock kickoff. He's starting his walking challenge at 4:30 a.m. on Saturday. He's hoping to arrive at Kenilworth Road by 11 p.m. First of all, if you're listening to this, Mark, wherever it is that you are on that road right now, keep going, fella. We're all right behind you, and we're looking forward to seeing you at Kenilworth Road on Saturday lunchtime.
Yeah, I bumped into him before the Preston game, actually. I had a good chat with him. He told me, he reminded me that we're getting up to start that walk at 4 a.m. From Milton Keynes, Bedford Way.
Milton Keynes.
And if you see him walking along, he said you can join him for a bit as well if you want. You can join him for some of it. If not, just encourage him. That's a hell of a effort.
And if you do see him at Kenilworth Road on Saturday, then make sure you give him your support, because he'll have just walked 20 odd miles, and he told me to remind you that he's doing 1 million steps, not 1 million miles, like you wrote in our show notes when we had him on the podcast. There's only so much that even the superhuman guy can do.
Yeah, I must confess, when I wrote that, it was very early in the morning, and I was thinking about the Proclaimers song. So, yeah. 1 million miles, 1 million steps. It's all 1 million something in it. It's a lot of effort.
Let's hope we're not 1 million miles from Luton getting 3 points on Saturday, though.
Hey, look at this.
You set them up, son. I'll volley them in the bottom corner.
Well, somebody's got to, haven't they?
Absolutely, they do, yeah. So, best wishes, Mark, and see you at Kenilworth Road, mate. Look forward to doing that. Get your score predictions in. Thanks to everyone who's commented on the podcasts over the last few days. We've kept an eye on all of them. Haven't always been able to reply to everyone. We've literally been rolling these out on a daily basis pretty much this week. But rest assured, every comment is looked at, and we do take notice of it and try and action it where we can. Do keep subscribing if you can. We would really love to get our numbers up. Podcasts are going to come slightly less thick and fast next week, because thankfully, Jimbo, there's no midweek game. We can have a week off.
Thank God. It's tiring editing all these things.
I can imagine it's just as tiring recording them as well, particularly when they're as frustrating as they were on Tuesday night. But yeah, if you do keep on subscribing, there are still 3 game weeks to come this season, so you'll get a notification of every single podcast that we put out. And as we said after the Oxford review, we will do a sort of deeper dive after that Sheffield Wednesday game where we've got 10 days off, so that we'll answer your questions, talk about some of the topics that you'd like us to discuss, and maybe even try and get some inside info if we can do to help us in that regard. So yeah, drop anything that you want us to talk about in the comments. Send some voice messages if you want to.
You can do that on Instagram. I don't know if you direct message on Instagram, you can do voice messages, I think.
At Luton Town ST is our Instagram feed, and we'll definitely pick those up, and we'll include them in that particular podcast, which will come out.
Keep them clean. No, hey,
yeah, we don't want Jimbo to have to edit them.
Bleeping them out.
No. And yeah, that'll come out between the Sheffield Wednesday and Sunderland games, somewhere around about the middle of that week. We'll get that out to you. That's it then for this episode. Thanks very much to the Barber Club and the lower level in Luton for hosting our studio. Really, really, really do appreciate your support, guys. As we do to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music, and to Ed Smith Creative for all the designs that you see on set. Until next time, which will be a review of what we hope are 3 massive points for Luton Town. If you've got a ticket in the Kenny on Saturday, make it loud and proud and as hostile as we possibly can. Every single game is vital to this cause now, and if we can roll those boys over the line and get them 3 points in the bag, so much the better. Let's do it. Let's all do it together. And well, as John Steele used to say, stronger the team, stronger the team. Till next time, from Jimbo and myself, come on you Hatters, let's do this.
I believe our supporters are the best supporters in the country.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul. This